So thank you for coming to our second session of this webinar on selecting a senior housing community, a life planning community in Baltimore. For anyone who missed last session one, my name is Jerry Doctrow. I've been a Beth Am member since 77, and spent about 20 years studying senior housing and care as this real estate consultant, stock analyst, investment banker, and was on the board of a publicly traded healthcare REIT, and now I'm on the board of Roland Park Place. Helping me today on this call is Becki Bees, who's the marketing director at Roland Park Place, and Susanna Kolstad, who's our ace technical support person from Beth Am. So we appreciate your help. This evening, we're going to focus on life planning communities and drill down on, what are they, what services they provide, the cost and different payment options and criteria to use in selecting them. We've focused on life planning communities because they offer the broadest range of services to seniors and are the most complicated in terms of payment structures. So we thought it'd be helpful to zero in on that. You should have received since the first session 2 emails from us. One just addresses some technical items like what are IADLs and that sort of stuff. I thought were not clear on the last call, and some other terminology. And then we also sent you I think we sent you a revised list of properties and stuff as well. Sorry. There also a second email that we sent that has 2 things. One, photos of some of the properties, because that was a question that we got. And one of the things we found surveying like people last time was there very few people actually seen some of these buildings. So it'd be helpful to let you see some of what they look like. And we'll get into that more a little bit today and more when we talk to a panel of people that live in these projects next week. Okay, I'm going to just make a few points about sort of the search process before we jump into the details of the life plan. One of the things we talked about last week was just, it's a challenge to get people to look at these projects, think about them, move, tour, that sort of thing. Again, I think responses you're going to get, regardless of whether you're a young old person or an older old person, is I don't want to live with all these old people. My mother said that to me when she was in her late 80s. I like my home garden, etc. It's so much more expensive than staying where I am, and we'll come back to that in some detail. And I want to stay independent, live on my own. That when you move to one of these things, you're somehow admitting a failure on yourself. One quote from an article was, "It's easier to plan for growth than plan for decline," which I thought was a good way to think about it. But what we are really want to keep driving home this point is planning ahead and better results. You as a senior are involved. You control the process. You decide where you want to be, what kind of care you want. And again, you save your family a lot of wear and tear by planning ahead. And the alternative is selecting a community within 24 or 48 hours in emergency, and it just doesn't produce good results. So we're strong advocates of planning ahead for a crisis, planning ahead of a crisis. Why move to a life planning community before developing health issues or losing a spouse? These are some of the benefits we touched on last week, but live longer. There are studies, and there's a reference here in later in a slide that you can look at the research yourself, that people in life planning communities have somewhat longer life expectancies, have better quality of life because their health is better, and did much better, did as well with COVID with outside. So, and again, one of the things that we sent you in just today was an article from the Wall Street Journal from, I think, the 13th, that talks about the importance of social interaction. It says a better predictor of happiness is whether you have good relationships than anything else, better than your health, your age, diet, any of that stuff. That having good relationships, having not being alone is the most important thing. And that's a study that's gone on for 85 years from Harvard. And again, I think one of the points that we made last week, but we maybe want to reemphasize, is one of the real advantages of being a community versus being at home is you have that relationship, you have interaction with a lot of other people, you have potential for social interaction, and much less chance of being lonely. Okay, let me. Okay, just again about the move. Recognize it's going to be stressful. Moves are always stressful. This one is maybe more stressful in a lot of ways. People are downsizing. It'll take time to adjust. People are feel. One of the things you'll see at the end of this slideshow is ways to evaluate communities, and people feel better about this communities the longer they're in there. So 2-3 years out, they're much happier than they were day one. There's going to be issues on the transition. Identify some positives. Again, I think the thing we really emphasize is social interaction, but there's also better nutrition, physical activity, and somewhat greater freedom because you've got transportation services and other sorts of things. So it's easier in some ways to interact, get out if you're in a place like this and trying to take care of your own transportation needs. Putting in your own familiar things, furniture, is important. Visiting often from family, whether they're in a facility or not, they really want the family contact. COVID made that very difficult. It was a challenge for both residents and staff over the last couple of years, but it's eased now. And get out and about. You'll see when we look at these photos that some of these communities are walkable to the mall in Towson, walkable to the Rotunda, walkable to Hopkins, and so you don't have to be isolated. And others are further out, but again, there's transportation options that they provide so that you're not isolated. Okay, shifting gears. There are abundant choices of life plan communities in Baltimore. 17 are licensed in the Baltimore metropolitan area. One is under development. Pickersgill, which is in Towson, we have a Beth Am resident that lives there, who's going to be on our panel. Doesn't charge an entrance fee, so it's not technically a life plan community, but it functions that way. It's been around for 15 years. It's got a campus, but it's all on a monthly fee basis. Let's see, during COVID, one proposed project, Carson's Run, was unable to obtain pre-sales and basically never opened, never built. I think I made a point last week, and I'm going to come back to this, that Maryland is a very good regulated state for life plan communities. And again, if you don't pre-sell enough units, you can't build. So that cuts down on the risk because the state's watching. One other thing is Erickson, which is, again, Baltimore-based company that builds these large projects, Oak Crest, Charlestown, has just obtained zoning approval for a new life plan community called Limestone Valley with 1,440 units in Howard County. That's still 2-3 years off, but it'll add a lot more units and opportunities to what's out there. So this is the list, and you've got this in your package. The ones in green are properties where we know Beth Am residents have moved, and not to say there aren't some others in other facilities, but these are the ones we know about. We can come back when you talk to the panel. You get more information. What's there? You can obviously call all these pages up on the web. Most of them, Roland Park Place is in Guilford, or in Roland Park, 2.5 miles from Beth Am. So it's a little more urban. North Oaks is Pikesville. Edenwald is Towson across from the mall. Charlestown is Catonsville. Broadmead is in Towson. Blakehurst is in Towson. North Oaks is the only community that's sort of marketed to the Jewish community. It's in Pikesville. They're undergoing a major renovation, so there wasn't. I didn't get pictures there because they don't put them up right now because it's probably a construction site. But a question came up last week about kosher food, and there's none of these are kosher. However, if you Google kosher assisted living in Baltimore, you come up with probably 10 or 12 properties that are very small, 3 units, 9 units, 14 units. So there are some options like that on the Park Heights corridor, not entrance fee, but more traditional assisted living. Okay. All right, so why pay an entrance fee? There's probably a little bit of history here that may be worth thinking about. A lot of these were not-for-profits started by charitable groups, and the history of the senior housing projects like the ones we're talking about today goes back over 100 years, maybe more, in the U.S. And some areas of the country have dramatically more of it even than we do, but Philadelphia area has a long history of life plan communities. It's very accepted, and people just use much more. But the entrance fee does a couple of things that we want to drill down on, which is why it's there because not-for-profits started this. Not-for-profits don't have capital to invest, so they use deposits and wealth from the prospective tenants to develop. That's sort of the history of this. The entrance fees do a couple of things. They reduce the monthly service cost for life plan community residents. So effectively what happens, and Becki will drill down on this in detail, but you pay an upfront fee, and over the first 5 years, they amortize that to essentially pay your costs. So you don't have to come out of pocket. So if you're on Social Security, other limited incomes, the entrance fee keeps your monthly bill lower and makes it easier for people to afford it. It offers tax advantages. We'll drill down on some of the details here, but the tax law basically says 50% roughly of your entrance fee is for medical costs. Medical costs are deductible if they're more than 7.9% of your taxable income. So that upfront fee, it's a couple $100,000, $300,000, $150,000 you might be able to deduct from your taxes in year one, or amortize it over a couple years, and you can take those losses, reduce your taxes. And then the final thing, again, Becki will drill down on the details of this, but it allows you to cap your future costs. So depending on which contract you get, the costs per month might be $10,000 for independent living, $14,000 or something for skilled nursing. But if you sign the right contract, you don't ever get to that 14. You pay the same fee that you would for an independent. It's going up by inflation, but so you cap some losses. So it's got an aspect of long-term care insurance in it as well. Now, if you've got questions, just feel free to jump in as we go through this. So the two issues, one is protection from rising healthcare costs, which I'm going to let Becki talk about, and the other is the tax advantages. So Becki, you want to help people understand a little bit better what this is all about?
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, you've got at least when we talk about different contract types. So sort of the original contract type is what we call for us is a traditional type A contract. So for a type A contract or life care contract, essentially what that means is for, let's say you're an individual and you move into a one-bedroom apartment, let's say you pay $4,000 a month, for example. So you're going to have all of your meals, or one meal a day included, housekeeping services included, laundry service and transportation activities. Some of that sort of, those amenities are included. But you also are, particularly for an individual, you're managing your future healthcare costs. So for example, at Roland Park Place, and it varies a little bit at different communities, kind of as your needs change. If you need to move to assisted living, or you need to move to memory care, or you need long-term care, what it does is for an individual, let's say you're paying $4,000 in independent living. If you move to assisted living, you're still paying $4,000. If you move to memory care, you're still paying $4,000. If you move to skilled nursing for long-term care, you're still paying $4,000. So you're really paying, you're prepaying that $4,000 in independent living for some of that future healthcare expense. So what it does is manages that future healthcare cost for you. And in doing that, you're paying for medical expense. And so that's where that, that tax deduction comes from. And so that's a life care contract. Now for a couple, you're going to pay a first person fee and a second person fee. So let's say your first person fee is $4,000 or whatever, depends on the apartment you select. And your second person fee is at Roland Park Place currently $1,140, so $1,140, different at different places. And so depending on how you move through the continuum, if you're in two different places, your second person monthly fee will change, but it's not going to change to market rate. So that would be a type A or life care contract. And you'll see that at different communities, some have life care, some don't have life care. Some have a type C, which is a fee for service contract, like the Erickson communities are all type C. Mercy Ridge is type C. Some of the communities like Roland Park Place offer a type A life care and a type C fee for service. But what the fee for service means is that if you are, from the perspective of the monthly fee, is that if you are, let's say you're in that same independent living apartment that the life care resident is paying $4,000 for, you might be paying $2,800 for that. And so you're paying that, you're getting the same amenities, the same meal, the same housekeeping services, all of those things. But if you move to assisted living or you move to skilled nursing, then you're going to pay the market rate. So for Roland Park Place, for example, someone can come directly into our memory care without being an independent living resident, and they would pay, like 2 months of entrance fee essentially, and then they'd pay about $9,000 a month. Skilled nursing, the monthly ends up being about $13,000 a month. So you're going to pay a lower fee in the independent living, but you're not prepaying for any medical expense there. So you're not getting the tax deduction. You're not prepaying. But this makes sense for people if they already have long-term care insurance that's going to cover those future costs. And it makes sense for somebody who, for example, your children, let's say, are very far away, and you think that you might, if you need a higher level of care, go to wherever they are, so that you wouldn't be accessing that higher level of care in the same community. Or you feel like, I'm just going to take that risk, and if I need that care, I'll pay for it, and I don't need it, I won't. So it really is one of the sort of fundamental things you want to kind of figure out for yourself, is which of those really makes the most sense for you, what you're comfortable with, because there are communities that only have one or the other. There is something as known as a type B contract, there aren't that many of them in Maryland, I don't think. And so essentially a type B means you're going to be prepaying for some portion of long-term care. So you may get it at a discounted rate, or you may get it at the same rate for a set amount of time. Maybe it's a year or 2 years. So that's kind of the variation. You'll also see a variation in entrance fee types. So you and some will strictly be with a type A or with a type C, but for the entrance fee, you typically will see a declining balance over a certain number of months. So let's say you pay, $200,000 to move in. The amount that's refundable to you if you should terminate your contract and move out declines over a set number of months. So at Roland Park Place, that's 60 months. Other communities, it's going to be 48 months or 50 months. And then there are typically refundable contracts. So your entrance fee, what we call accommodation fee, are typically going to be higher, but you'll get back, in most instances, it's a 90% refundable entrance fee. So, and that's going to really depend again on what makes sense for you and for your family. We've seen instances where family members pay the entrance fee, and then one day they'll get 90% of that back. So we'll see other instances where, from a tax perspective, it makes more sense to do a declining balance or a non-refundable. There are also 50% refundables, there are 80% refundables, there are 100% refundables. So you'll see different things at different communities. And so typically you'll be able to take, whatever entrance fees options are available with different types of contracts. So those are the two main things that you've got to kind of figure out what makes the most sense for you.
So I just add a little bit on that, and maybe we'll take some specific examples. If you look at some of these numbers on the slide, again, in terms of one big choice is type A versus type C, which is basically, am I buying long-term care price protection or not? And the second big issue is whether you want it refundable or not. I think from a purely financial standpoint, having it non-refundable is a better deal, because the entrance price is lower, and you're assuring you're putting in the money for care, and it costs you less. But a lot of seniors are concerned, maybe because of health issues, other issues, because they feel that they need to give money back to their families. They want it refundable. I was having a conversation with friends on Saturday, but also Beth Am members who felt they've done a lot for their kids, college, and help out with the house, and they don't need to give them more. So I think, again, from a purely economic standpoint, non-refundable is more effective, but you have your choices there. And again, just to make clear, something else Becki was saying, there's a second, so these were done as for a couple moving in, because the people at Beth Am that I was talking to originally on this are each couples. So you got the second person fee and the second person monthly. Again, here, just on the one bedroom, 283, 850 is non-refundable. And then on a monthly basis, you'll be paying first person 4664 plus the second plus the 1440, and then the entrance fee, initial entrance fee, will actually be 28,383, 850 plus that 36,000. Hopefully I haven't confused you more. If you have long-term care insurance, or again, you may decide you don't want the price protection of long-term care, you can go to Plan C, and for the same unit, you can see the cost there as well. The entrance fee is $90,000 less. And so, questions about that before we move on? Or Becki, you want to add other things?
Yeah, I think the other thing, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just had a question just kind of similar to the model of fund, how of the different types of mutual funds or way of buying mutual fund. There are different classes, and depending on whether you're going to be able to, I don't know, sell it in 5 years or 7 years, you don't have to pay something, and you pay up front on. Some pay up front, some pay when you sell it. Well, if it's not relevant, no, I'll just let's just go on.
I think the key point here is a very personalized decision, and you can tailor the plan that best suits your needs. But it's a substantial fee, and it's one of the things you want to consider when you move into one of these communities.
I will share too, just based on just in thinking of that, around the refundability of the entrance fee. So whether you've got a declining balance and you're there for, within the time frame, or you've taken a 90% or 50% refundable entrance fee, the refund is based on, and this is really true of in some level of different every community. So and that really is something that the Department of Aging really presses on, because it protects the community and all the people still living there, is that the accommodation fee or entrance fee isn't refundable until your independent living apartment has been reoccupied and you have left the community. So, for example, if you've got an apartment and you move to assisted living or skilled nursing, someone new moves into your independent living apartment, the refund isn't paid until you've left us. And so if you terminate your contract and you leave and say, I'm moving to Arizona, your refund, that 90% refundable amount, isn't payable until the next person takes the apartment. So it is something to consider when you're looking at units and considering the refundability. If you are taking something that is maybe less popular, looks at a dumpster or something, you're going to consider that it's going to take longer to resell that apartment, and you're going to be waiting a longer time. Hopefully not you, hopefully, your children or whoever are going to be waiting a longer time for that refund. So it is something to think about when you're making that apartment selection. You might not, might not bother you, but if you're taking a refundable contract, the apartment really will dictate how long it takes to reoccupy. So you might ask questions about, how long an apartment like that typically takes. Is it popular? Things like that.
Other questions before we move on? Okay. Okay. So sorry, my mouse here is too sensitive for me. Okay, here we are. So again, I skipped past the slide. I put it up before, but it's just what services are included or not included, and it does vary from community to communities when you start comparing prices. You want to know what's included. Roland Park, for example, provides free transportation, I think, to doctors' offices, other places. That's a fee. So a big argument and a legitimate argument certainly is this is so much more expensive than living where I am. I want to just go through that a little bit. Most people, when they compare the costs of a long life plan community, and again, we're looking at two people here, that's the example, versus the cost of staying at home. Look at the cost of the community is $15,000 to $20,000 per month, and the cost of staying at home is $3,000 to $6,000, and that's really a dramatic difference. But there's two big things that are left out in that calculation. One is home health, because in a community like this, you're getting access to skilled nursing, you're getting access to medical units, and if you want to be honest with yourself, paying at least some amount for home health is there. So And the other thing, people ignore the value of their house. So you're in your house, it's probably paid for if you've been there long enough. But the cost to maintain it, the sunk cost in that property, your equity, is not getting a return. So what we do to do sort of I do to do an apples to apples comparison, or more of an apples to apples comparison, is look at how much home health you're going to need per week. This assumes one home health worker 44 hours a week. And you also have to assume some value for your house. There's a couple of different ways to do that, but what we did here is assume you could rent it for 7% return, a $450,000 house, which is based on some of the neighborhoods where people that I was talking to specifically lived, and that changes the calculation. So the monthly fee for that is about $7,500 a month without amortizing the entrance fee, versus about $14,000 stay at home. So out of pocket on a monthly basis, you're actually paying less. If you add in the amortization of the entrance fee, and that's really, it continues to benefit you down throughout the life of your property, life of your residency, but it's amortized into income from the property standpoint at Roland Park for 60 months. And again, Becki, some others is a little different. What that does is it monthly cost is $19,601 for the first 5 years, because we're assuming the amortization of the entrance fee, versus a cost of $14,369 at home. So it's a little bit more expensive, but you're getting access to healthcare. You're getting all these services. You're getting meals. So it's not as dramatically different as people's first perception of this, and really the reality. And I would do the same notice for my wife and I. We live in a full service condo, so the fees are relatively high. It's about equal dollar to dollar for us. And again, it's going to vary a lot with your circumstances, but in terms of the sticker shock people have versus what these cost, it's not as great as most people think. Questions about that? Was there a question? No.
Well, I have another question. I'm not quite sure it fits in here so much. In terms of meals, you're provided all meals in this the LPC or not?
So typically you're going to have a set number so for Roland Park Place, for example, and when you're in independent living, you have 1 meal a day, or the equivalent of 1 meal a day. So you have essentially what breaks down to be $14.50 a day to spend on meals. If you go to the landing, which is our restaurant style dining for dinner, you're spending $14.50 for your entree, super salad, sides, dessert, hot drink, cold drink. And that's, you could be getting a crab cake every night and get a petite filet mignon. There are lots of choices. Or if you're not at dinner, you could, use that for a guest, or you can break that up and spend it in the bistro for breakfast or lunch. You'd probably spend, $6 on a, lunch or something like that. If you're in a higher level of service, like an assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, 3 meals are included.
Well,
so in independent living, every apartment has a full kitchen.
Well, my question then is there any allowance made for being, say, a vegetarian or somebody who eats only organic?
We have a vegetarian option at every meal, and so they'll indicate, which is the vegetarian option, and all organic, not necessarily. But we do have a Mom's across the street, so it typically specific diets. Most people will, work with our dining department and talk about, what choices they can make within what we have. We're not going to be able to accommodate every single specific diet, but we can get as close as we can and give recommendations there.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, evaluating a life plan community. So what makes this challenging, in addition to all the numbers we've been running by you, is you got to think about this as both a place to live and as a financial investment, particularly when there's an entrance fee involved. The best way to determine if the community is good for you is to live, spend time there, try the food, come to some programs, talk to existing residents, you know, I said assume 3 months to a year to decide a community that you like, and Becki may elaborate on that in terms of what she sees people doing. The residents, again, are a great source of information. That's what I think the panel will be helpful to you. And the other thing is at the end of this that we probably won't talk about in detail, but I put together a 5-page guide to evaluating a community. So it talks about, from research again done at the industry level, what makes customers happy, and you can turn that around and sort of have a checklist of what's important to look at. But certainly the food is a big issue, but you can look at that, and any of the questions we can talk about next week. But it gives you sort of a checklist of things to look for. In Maryland, life plan community is regulated by the Department of Aging, and they review financial statements, require communities to provide disclosures, and have information on fees and stability, how much the fees have grown. They'll look at deposits and what the balances are on the deposits. The accounting for this is complicated because you're going to bring in reserves and amortize them over time, paying them out as some people leave. So I think it's helpful to get a professional to look at it, financial advisor, accountant. Again, the Department of Aging has referrals they can make to you in any county in Maryland. You get people, but we're not going to try and go into the evaluating a financial statement. The other thing that is also new to me in this field is there are some law firms that can provide case managers as well as legal advice to sort of manage your care. So you do find situations where a senior is without family at all or without family close. Again, if they have dementia or whatever, is not really capable of making some of the financial decisions, so they can set up a guardian basically to oversee that. So I don't know, Becki, you've dealt with that at all, but my college roommate is a family lawyer in Seattle, and he's worked on a number of these, both for people with other issues as well as just seniors. So
yeah. And I don't remember if we talked about this or not, but I mean, I like some of the groups like Compass Group or Faretto, if you're looking for referrals to different places, because you want to work with, certainly if you're looking for referrals to service providers, or, you know, even care management, you want to look to someone who you're going to pay a fee to versus someone who's going to get a fee from whoever they refer you to. So that's one of the things to consider, but there are certainly some people who specialize in this. I will say too, just from the perspective of going to evaluate communities from just a general standpoint, is to go, you know, to a bunch of different communities, schedule a tour, come in, you know, ask your questions, see the community, you know, get the vibe, as my daughter would say, feel the vibe. But you want to make sure that you have your questions answered and that you feel comfortable there. And then you want to narrow it down and maybe come to dinner, and be asked to have dinner with some residents. And so that way, you know, really your salesperson or senior advisor from the community is not really there. You have an opportunity to experience the food, experience the ambiance, and talk to some residents who live there. And it's a really good way to experience, you know, each community get a feel for whether or not you're gonna be happy there.
Becki, one bit of advice I used to give people that are looking to buy houses in Baltimore and renovate them is go to the community at 2 in the morning when the bar's let out and see what it's really like. So do you have people that come in the night shifts and see how well staffed you are?
I mean, we do. I mean, you're if that's what if you want to look at like the care side, it's a little more complicated now with COVID because you want to make sure you have somebody, you know, kind of with you and leading you through that. But yeah, I mean, most places are really an open book. You know, you can see all of the survey results for the nursing home section if they have it, or the assisted living section, to be able to see where what deficiencies there might be. You can, I would definitely encourage you to visit the care section. Some people are, you know, they come and tour and they're like, I'm not really interested in seeing that. You should see it. You know, it's part of the reason that you buy into the community. I think one of the benefits, I think there are many, but one of the benefits of a life plan community is that you have independent living residents who are very interested and involved in the care settings. Many people have spouses who are independent living side. A lot of people are really, you know, have friends. If your friend moves from independent living to assisted living, you're still going to want to be following up with them. So there are a lot more advocates, I would say, to make sure that things are going the way that they're supposed to go. So, but I would encourage you to see all the spaces when you visit, and you don't need to feel like you have to do it all at once. It's a lot. There's a lot to consider. So, you know, we're always welcoming people to come back.
Life plan community risks. So as a stock analyst, investment banker, one of the things you're trained to do is look at risk. I was involved in a transaction where we sold a dozen life plan properties in the Southeast for a substantial amount of money in 2017, I think. I think, again, just to reiterate some of the points Becki was making, LPCs, life plan communities, use entrance fees to fund capital projects, to refund entrance fees due to residents who leave. I'm sure this is done a lot, but if they need to, they can use it for operating funds as well. When the housing market slows, if people aren't buying in, there's less new entrance fee deposits coming in. You may have more units you owe people on, but you don't have to pay until the unit is resold. But it slows the cash flow coming in. The other challenge that everybody's facing in this industry is rising costs, labor, supplies, materials. So the risk is that there isn't enough entrance fees, and the facility just doesn't have the money to provide all the services it can. The way the state accreditation agencies, bond underwriters limit that risk, again, particularly Maryland does this well, is require that they get deposits for a lot of the units before they start construction. There's also requirements about retaining those monies and retaining reserves so that they have a cushion against any adverse thing that can come up. There's not a default that I'm aware of in Maryland. Becki, I think, made a mention last week that she believes most of the communities out there at 17 are solid financially. I would agree with that. But you want to do your homework and just check. Again, the point, they can delay the entrance fee, will delay the entrance fee until the unit is resold and you're no longer on site. So there is a delay there, but that's also beneficial to the facility. It keeps their financial strength better because they're not paying out immediately. Question about any of that? Um,
Go ahead.
sorry. So accreditation, if you went back to our table that had all the list of the 17 communities, some of these are accredited. So 3 of them in the community here are accredited by CARF, I think it's called now. And that's sort of the same kind of regulation, regulates hospitals, accredits hospitals, same kind of regulation or organization that accredits colleges. So I bet you can maybe talk about how much difference it makes, but it's another layer of protection because they come in and do regular reviews. So that's something you might want to consider. And again, all of these facilities are having accounting done once a year, supervised by the state, are having actuaries come in to look at the age of their residents, the costs, and setting those standards for what the detention fees really should be. Becki, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, the CARF accreditation really is, it's a 5-year accreditation, and it allows you to benchmark as well against other accredited communities. So both from a financial perspective and a person-centered care, they're very focused on, you know, the services and programs being centered around the resident. And so both from, it's usually a peer review. So you have people from different parts of the country come in and review your financial information and all of the programs. And so it's valuable in that you really get, you know, kind of another level of benchmarking as well as just best practices.
All right, I think so. It's sort of a wrap up, and I'm going to see if I can move this to I can show you some of the photos while we're chatting as well. But other questions people have?
I see one question.
Yeah, I don't know if these are really so relevant to you, and I could perhaps take them offline if you think it's better to do that. But you were mentioning back the 2-person option, or and you mentioned in terms of spouse. Does that second person have to be a spouse?
No. You're just going to be on the contract together.
And what happens if one wants to leave and the other one doesn't?
That's a good question. Doesn't happen too often.
Right.
Typically, because you're on the agreement together, you'd really probably need to terminate the contract and enter into a new agreement on your own. There is sort of I guess you can look at it if that's not true, because you're terminating one. If, let's say, a spouse dies, then you are terminating that person from the agreement as well. So it would be looked at the same way.
Okay, thank you.
You gotta think out loud on that one. Any other questions?
Feel free to use the chat too if you'd prefer.
While people are thinking about questions, I'm just going to show you quickly some of the photos. We're going to have folks from 4 communities on next week. One is Broadmead, which is Baltimore County sort of north of Hunt Valley. This is more of a campus, so there's individual cottages and well landscaped grounds. This is their mid-rise units where I think the people that we're going to talk to from Beth Am live. These are newer. Again, one of the things you see there is you have to walk to get to the dining room and that sort of thing. And there's a covered walkways. This is Edenwald, which is in Towson across from the mall.
Jerry, we're not seeing your screen.
Oh, sorry. One sec. All right, you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
And I will give it the size. It looks got a little busy, but I think that I can show you some of the other stuff as well. So Edenwald, again, this is the exterior walkable to the mall, and but a high rise, more urban project than certainly Broadmead. These are exteriors or interior. The exterior, here's the interior of a unit. This is Oakcrest and Ariel. So Oakcrest again is the Erickson community. I took their one. This is sort of northeast Perry Hall, but again, this is 1,400 or so units. It's more of their prototype. Charlestown was the first project and sort of grew organically over many years. So this is a little more representative of what you'll get in Howard County and their typical project. And again, central dining and restaurants and things, and then more housing around than you see. Each of these separate buildings could be the size of a life plan community elsewhere. Again, some people I talk to really have a problem with the size of this. It's sort of overwhelming, but there are some advantages in terms of, again, diversity of services and programming. We talked the other week about they have their own Medicare Advantage plan, big medical clinic inside, fully staffed 24/7. So there's some advantages that size gives you. This is just an entrance. And this is Roland Park Place. There is both the original building, which is 1984, I think, Becki.
Yeah.
And then this is 2002, just 22, just last year opened. And there's some older properties which are used for administrative offices and things that are on site. This is right on Roland 40th, just near Roland. This is a view from the 8th floor of the new addition, which has got a lounge and Roland Park Place interior with the wife of one of my old bosses. Question of any of that, you've got them with you, but it'll give you a little bit better feel. Pickersgill is not here. Again, they did not have much on their website in terms of photos. But I think it gives you a sense of what they look like. All right, any other questions? We've numbed you with entrance fee trivia.
Do you have interiors for some of the others, or those are the only
I think
ones?
you, well, you can go on the website and just get 50 pictures. So I didn't want to give you too much, but I wanted to give you people a feel. Again, it's a suggestion from one of our participants. Give you a feel of what these are like. And again, there is, even though they're all life plan communities, in many cases with communities, we showed you comparable fees, but very different lifestyles. So you can have choices. All right. I guess we will wrap up unless we have other questions. Suzanne, what do a sense when these are going to be posted up on website?
Yes, I'm working on it. We were trying to get the video loaded today, but it just wasn't able to get finished today. So I will try and have the first 2 videos and the slides and everything placed on our website, and I'll email you all links as well.
Okay, just for those
Before the
people
end of
that-
the week.
all right, that's fine. And go ahead.
One thing that wasn't clear to me was something about with a refundable entrance fee, and then there was some text about 60 days or something like that. So the entrance fee, a portion of it is refundable anytime, not based on the 60 days or something like that.
So there are a couple different things. So for when a refund is due, let's say we would refer to it as being triggered by it being reoccupied or without a required reoccupation, then the refund is actually due 60 days from that triggering event.
Oh, it's not inhabiting the property for 60 days and then it's.
No, but
Okay.
the other piece that had a 60 in it was that, for example, for the declining balance, the traditional entrance fee, there's the entrance fee is refundable based on a 60-month declining balance. So if you're let's say you're at Roland Park Place for a year, you might be getting 80% of that back. After 5 years, you're not getting any of that back. So every month, the amount that's refundable to you declines. And I think Jerry listed it as non-refundable because that's when we talk to people, we say, you want to consider it non-refundable. You want to plan to be here more than 5 years and not get that money back. But if for some reason you're here less than 5 years, there is a portion of that would remain refundable based on how long you were here.
Okay.
So they're 2 different things, but both related to the refund.
And when you go to the 50% refundable or 90% refundable, which is talked about here, you always get that amount back whenever you leave.
Right. It's 90% of what you paid or 50% of what you paid. It has nothing to do with what the next person pays.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. And the question, do heirs get refund if person passes away? So, and I think this is probably true now of all the communities, in that when you sign your residency agreement or residence and care agreement, the contract, when you move in, you're asked to designate a beneficiary for your entrance fee refund, if there is any.
So Becki, one thing I had when I was thinking about this was, if you are out of money and need nursing care, Medicaid will pay for you. And again, those rules are very strict generally, and particularly in Maryland, you have to be totally destitute, no house, no cash. So most people that are going in here are never going to qualify. But if you get refunded, Medicaid will take it before you can use Medicaid, probably. So,
you also have to look at, for example, Roland Park Place is not licensed for Medicaid. We're licensed for Medicare. So if you have a qualifying stay in Medicare, then you will be paying the monthly fee for any time that Medicare covers your stay. But as we talked about, yeah, Medicaid is a different thing. So I think Oak Crest, for example, has some Medicare beds.
Medicaid.
Them as beds, Medicaid beds. Sorry, yeah. Roland Park Place does. I mean, we qualify you, and this can be true of any life plan community. You're going to be qualified financially upfront, qualified medically upfront. So you have to qualify to come into independent living. You have to qualify financially for the apartment that you're looking for. They'll set, we'll look at your life expectancy, how many years you're expected to be here, and if you have the funds to cover that based on what you're looking at, then you'd be approved financially. But once you're approved financially, if you do run out of resources, you live to 115 and no one planned on that, then we do have a residence assistance fund that will kick in and supplement the fees. If you've got a refundable entrance fee and there's some refundability there, we'll spend down on that before you can access the Residents Assistance Fund. But most communities, definitely all of the nonprofits, and probably I'm assuming some of the for-profits as well have some kind of benevolent fund like that.
Other questions? And okay, and if there's things that you think about over the next week, let me know. What we're going to have next week is the panel. Again, somebody from Pickersgill, Broadmead, Roland Park Place, and Edenwald. And I think you'll find them supportive of this. I ask each of the panelists to give them specific questions. What do they do in their process for evaluating? What motivated them to move in? Obviously, how satisfied they are. Give you a sense of the age they moved in. So we should just go through a roundtable and get a little information on each of them, and then you'll be able to talk to them about their experiences. All right, we thank you for participating. And again, one of the things we got after the first session was suggestions for future topics, and just drill down on questions. So again, if you have things that you think about, there's a lot of information we threw at you tonight. Shoot us an email, and we'll address it if we can before the session or afterwards. And we'll let you know when it goes online, but again, the recordings will be online in a week or two, and you can come back and take a look at it, or you have friends. All right. Thank you all. Have a good night.